So this is a picture from Sktchy. I've got this on my iPad Pro. I don't usually have a picture this big. I've got an old, smaller iPad that I usually have my image on, but I'm using that to video. So I've got it on my great big super duper iPad Pro today. Oh, so this is my image, and I've just drawn it in my sketchbook. This is a, I'll show you. This is a Leigh-Phippard sketchbook, so it's a handmade sketchbook from Portugal, and I really like this paper. It's quite rough on one side and smooth on the other. So that sometimes I prefer the rough side, sometimes I prefer the smooth side, but I just take whatever page is next. So I've drawn I drew my face first in pencil, and then did the outline. I used this time I just pick different pens depending on my mood, but today I used two Copic multi-liners, an 02 and an 0.05 today. But more often, this is my usual pen, is a Unipin 03, but I just decided that her face is quite delicate and I thought it would be too thick. So I used a finer line today. And I've used a little bit of mask on it. So I used, this is a Molotov masking pen, which I really like. Sometimes I use this, which is a mask pen, but that comes out quite, I mean, it gives you a thin line, but it's quite thick mask. And I quite like the Molotov because it doesn't go on very thick. So sometimes the paint goes through it, and I quite like that. So you don't get such a kind of really defined mask, and I quite like that. So that's the one I use more than anything, is the Molotov, because I really like it. And I'm just letting it dry a little bit. So I'll show you my paints. So these are my paints, and these are Zecchi paints which come from Florence. So we went to Florence and I bought some, and I like them so much, so I reordered them from Zecchi, which is quite a complicated process, because they do have an online shop, but you order your pans and then they send you an email telling you how much it costs with a PayPal link if you're happy to pay, because they work out the shipping. They ship by courier. So the pans aren't expensive, the courier shipping is quite expensive, but it's worth it in my view, because I love their paints. And you can see most of these are Daniel Smith's over here, which I don't really use, except that's Quin Gold, which I do use, but you can see the paints I use the most. I've just run out of Ultramarine Blue. That's Ultramarine Blue Light. And I'm gutted because I don't have any right now, and that's the colour I use probably more than anything. And that yellow ochre. But I've got a spare yellow ochre still, because I buy loads and loads of that, because I use that more than anything. So my three skin tone colours are yellow ochre, Ultramarine Blue Light, and Cadmium Red Light, and those are the ones I use the most. And I also use a little bit of primary red, and sometimes maybe a little bit of Cerulean Blue, sometimes a little bit of Cadmium Red Light. These are the ones I'll probably use a little bit of today. And sometimes I use some burnt umber for eyes or hair. The other colours, you can see, that's the one I got in the set originally. I've barely touched it. These were ones I bought extra. So the set came with those. And some of these I've never replaced. I've never replaced that. I've never replaced that. Haven't replaced those. Haven't replaced that. So, and the others I've replaced probably 4 or 5 times now. And I bought these as extras when I first ordered some refills. I bought these as extras thinking, well, quite like those greens. Always like to have blues. I always have more blues than anything in my watercolours, because I use a lot of blues. And I've never replaced any of these. So I could quite happily get by on a set of 6 paints and never ever have anything else. I could easily get by. with 2 blues, 2 reds and 2 yellows, and probably never have anything else without a problem. And maybe 1 brown, so maybe 7, and never have anything else, and it wouldn't be a problem to me at all, because I don't really use anything else. So today these are the ones I'll be using. I'll probably use those 2, blue, yellow, and I might use the brown. Actually, I probably won't use the brown, looking at her. No, probably won't use the brown. So I'll get by quite easily with the 6. And what I will probably use is, for the hair, I have a set of Schminker pearlescents. So I will definitely use probably that one. Maybe with a bit of the white added in for the hair. So I've got those because I will use those. But I'm just going to show you the skin tones. I won't bother showing you the hair painting. And my usual brushes, the brushes I use is, I don't even know what brand this is. This is just something I bought. I don't know. No idea what brand. I had a set of brushes I really liked that I used for ages. And then I left them on my desk. And this is a little room built onto the back of our house. And some mice got in and they ate my brushes. So I had to buy some. I left them on the desk, drying overnight. So I had to buy some new ones. And these were supposed to be the same size, and they're not. They're totally different sizes. So this is supposed to be a 2, but it really isn't. It's much bigger. But anyway, I like this one. It's a nice big one. And then I use this one, which I think is also supposed to be a 2, but I've got no idea what brand it is. But I've got a whole pot of brushes, and I've got more. I've got about 30 brushes, but these are probably the 2 I use the most. And then I've got a rigger that I like a lot, which is a rigger number 1. But I like that a lot. I'm getting too warm. So the other thing I always use is a spray. I think this was a Felix tip. So I won't even bother spraying the other side because I know I'm not going to use them, because I never do. So, and I have here, these were just cut off when I used some water for something. I've always got a bit of watercolour paper to test my colours before I put them on the page. So I always start, my first layer is always going to be yellow ochre. I'm just going to check that you can see that on the video. You can. Okay, cool. So really, really, really thin. The other thing I need, oh, I've got one there, is I have a Kleenex and some kitchen towel. So I've got a ceramic palette as well that I like using, but you won't be able to see if I use it now. I have this tiny desk. It's a really tiny crowded desk, and I've put too much pink in there now, so I might have to start again. Yeah, I'm going to start again. So I put way too much pink in that. So if you put too much in, the easiest thing to do is start again, because you'll never get it right if you try and refix it. So I'm going to start again. Lots of water. So my first layer of colour always has to be a kind of quite yellowy skin tone, just because I find if it's too pink, you can't correct it. If it's yellow, it's easy to, this is just the way I work, if it's yellow it's easy to correct it with more pink, but if it's too pink to start with, it's really hard to correct. So I need just a little bit of, this is Cadmium Red Light I'm adding. There, can you see that's so much more yellow than that first pink that I did? I still might add a bit more yellow to that. Now, if I add more water, I know lots of people add blue initially, but I don't. I start with that. Now, if I put that on there and show you, can you see it's almost not even a colour? And that's what I start with. Because if you look, if I show you here, if you look at this here, up here, it's really light. And down here, her skin is really light. So I start with a really light colour, because you can always add more. Oh, I've got some fluff in it there. Because I rub out pencil before, there's always a bit of fluff in it, but it's not the end of the world because you can rub that off afterwards. So can you see it still looks quite dark and yellowy on her skin, but it'll dry lighter. I don't really worry about going over the edges. And I've got some fluff in my brush too. I used to not mask, and I used to try and just leave white spots, but it never worked, and it's so much easier once you mask because you can just then slap your paint on. And if I work in a bigger book, then I'll use a bigger brush, but this brush is fine for here. Then, so once I've got it all on, then this is what the Kleenex is for. Where it's really white, like on her chin. I learnt this from Marguerite Assmann, who does Sktchy classes and is in sketchbook school. So if you're watching this, Marguerite, thank you very much. Where it's really white, you just take some of the pigment off so that the skin tone isn't all the same. You probably can't see it very well from where you are, from looking, but I can see that it's now lighter in some places, and this works much better when you put darker colour on. So, and that layer's probably so thin it might almost be dry, but I have a hairdryer. And then all I'm going to do is, to that mix, I'm going to add the tiniest bit of cadmium red and just make it a little bit darker. And then I just keep going, so I then just put another layer on top. So it's about being really patient and just building up the layers and really looking at the picture. So looking at where the darker colour is. So there's some here, but it's not there. And it's all around the edges of her skin, or the edges of her face. So you could be quite quick with the first layer, but after that you can't be, because you have to really look at where the colour is. Now it's everywhere here, so I can be quite quick here, because this side it's all there. I don't know if you can even see very much difference on that video, but I can see the difference. And also, the more you do this, the more you learn to look for where the colour is. So you kind of know that there's going to be certain colours in certain places. Now what I do here is where there's kind of a hard line there, I just use plain water to just soften it off. Later on I'm going to leave hard lines deliberately, but this early on I don't need to. And then I'm just going to add a bit more. So I've gone quite a bit darker there. Is it too dark? No, it's okay. Because she's going quite a bit darker, her skin now. And I might even use this while it's still wet, because there we are, it'll flow into the wet areas. So I've gone a bit darker, because it's still wet. It's kind of, the red is softening into the darker areas where her skin is really wet. So over here, you might not be able to see that actually on the video. Over here, she's got really pink cheeks and pink, so I'm just adding it where it's pink, and with the brush just letting it move into those pink areas a bit. I will add some pink in a bit so that it's not as red as it is right now, to pink it up, but I'll do that in a separate layer. So all I'm doing, all I ever do, is look where the colour is and just add it, but add it layer by layer by layer. Very, very slowly. And I just started doing this. I did start doing this after I did Felix's class in one of the sketchbook school courses, because I didn't know how to use watercolour. And I found that just by adding one colour or a mix of two colours, one at a time, really gently, that I could control it. Because it's really easy this way. You can just put it where you want and it doesn't kind of run away with you very much. So it's much more controllable than just putting it on wet and it going wherever it wants. So if you're scared of watercolour, I really recommend this as a way of kind of letting it do its thing, but it doesn't go away from you too much. You can still kind of control it. And then if it ends up like there, doing something you don't want it to do, just add water to your brush and just brush it out. Because the colour's so thin, because I haven't put loads and loads of colour in it. So if it ends up doing something you don't want, you can just brush it away. And also you can just, like here it's gone a bit dark, just get a tissue and dab it off. And the colour's not really dark, so you don't end up making it look really odd. It looks really natural. And also again, because the colour's quite thin, if it ends up to the wrong colour, you can correct it in the next layer by adding a different colour. So quite often at this point, if I keep going, it will end up being too orange. But it doesn't matter, because I'm going to add blue and yellow and pink in layers that go on top. So you can kind of correct any colour that goes wrong, you can correct it later. It's just really about learning to look for the colours in the picture and then correcting it. So I'm going to dry that off, and then in a minute I'll move this over again to show you. You can see that she's really pink here. So and I'm a bit orange. So that's when I use the other red. That's when I'll use the sorry, I'll show you. Can't do it, I haven't got enough hands. So I'll move that over. So this red here, this primary red, is more of a bluey red. So I'll use that one, which is a much pinker colour. But first of all, I need to dry it. That I should probably be saying things like warm reds and cold reds, but I don't really understand warm and cold. I mean, I'm guessing that this is a cold red, and that's the Cadmium Red Light is a warm red, but that is a guess more than really understanding colour theory, because I don't. I just go with it instinctively, what I think is right. So I always use colour instinctively. I have read a little bit of colour theory, so I understand about I understand that you should use warm reds and you should use cold reds together, but I don't really use them that way because I don't really get it. I couldn't easily look at a colour and tell you if it was warm or cold, except that I can see that is an orangey, that cadmium red is an orangey red, and therefore I take that to be a cold red. But it doesn't come easily to me, it doesn't come naturally to me, and that's too dark, so I'm going to take that off straight away. I haven't added enough water. So you see, I make mistakes all the time, and I should have tested it on there first. So it's not that I don't make mistakes, but I'm also, I don't really worry about them. I have no problem going in there with a towel and just taking it off. And if I left it on, I would just correct it. As in, I'd add more water to it on there, or I'd leave it there and just correct it in the next layer. by adding, I don't know, probably more yellow. So I used not to know, until I saw Marguerite do it, it never occurred to me that you could just dab it with a towel and take it off. I had to see someone do it, for me, someone else do it for it to occur to me that I could just do that. But you can, and it's fine. So I just added water to that because I just want to move it out a little bit. So that's the other thing you can do. If you put it on and it's just too dark, just wet your brush and move it. So a lot of this now I just do by instinct. If it goes on and it doesn't look right, just wet my brush and move it. And you can do that. There's no reason why not. There's no, you know, people make up rules about what you can and can't do. But as far as I'm concerned, there's no rules. Just do what feels right and what looks right to you. So I'm really just looking at the picture and looking at where it's pink, which is kind of up here and around her cheek. And I feel like she needs more pink there. And really this is just what I do with my Copics. It's no different. To me, my watercolour, how I use watercolours is totally informed by what I do with my Copics, which is where I started using colour. So I just look for where the colour is and then put it on. So this is exactly the same as my Copic technique. It's just layering with colour. And that's a bit thick, so I'm going to take it off again. And I'm just using water here to thin this out because it looked a bit much. And although it looks a bit much at the moment now, I'm not worried because I know it won't, because I've got to add all the shadows yet. So I'm going to be adding, it looks really pink right now, but I'm looking at the picture and I can see that there's lots of shadows and lots of blue that's going to go on. So they will soften it. And the last layer I always add is a layer of yellow. I do that with my Copic pictures as well. I always add yellow at the end to brighten up a picture. I do that with Copics and I do that with watercolours. So again, I know that on top of this it's going to go a layer of shadow and a layer of Copics. So I don't worry at all about how pink it's looking at the moment, because I know that's going to be muted down before I'm finished. But I'm happy with how that looks at the moment, except for maybe a little bit down there. And then what I might do is put that brush down and use a smaller brush and put some of the same colour on her lips, because I feel like that's a good base colour for her lips too. So I might as well use it while it's there. Move those brushes out. And at this point I'd usually just, while that's all drying, go in and do her eyes, because once I start doing the shadow, because at this point I probably want to do the shadows next, and when I'm doing the shadows I want to do some of the shadows in the eyes, and I can't really do that unless I've done the rest of the eyes. And actually I can just see that I always forget to do this part of the eye. I have to kind of figure out what colour that is. Is it pink or is it red? And I'm not sure at the moment. So I'll just leave it like that for now. I need to go in and do the eyes, which right now, look, maybe I'll start them in that colour. I find the eyes quite hard to do in watercolour, especially in a sketchbook this size. It's easier in a bigger sketchbook because there's so many different colours in them. Quite often I find I end up going back in colour pencil and adding all the different shades, because I find it quite hard to do just in watercolour. Can't really get all the colours. So we'll start with that, see where we go from there. Now I have to wait a minute because that's quite watery. So I can't use a hairdryer yet because it's quite a big blob of water. The hairdryer will send it flying. So I have to wait for it to dry a little bit. But I could do a bit more on her lips. So this is where it's quite tricky for me because normally I would add, so my Ultramarine Blue Light is usually all my shadow colours and I haven't got any. So, and I tried to order the other day from the Zecchi store and they're shut until September, so I can't reorder any. They courier it, so I'd have it in 2 days, but so I can't use it. So I have some Jackson's paint, and I have an Ultramarine Blue Light in those, so I might have to use those instead, which isn't as good as Zecchi, but it'll do. See, this is a Jackson set I've got, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 blues, including an Ultramarine Blue Light, so I'll have to use their blue, I think. So, see, it gives such really nice shadow colours. I need a bit more blue, I think. See, this is why I like Ultramarine Blue Light, because it gives you the best purples. Still not dark enough though. Okay. Now I could use that for some of my other shadows. I'm going to try and dry it. So hopefully you can see now that the skin tone, see that, especially up there, that's a pretty good base skin tone. And really the choices you make are between where you soften the edges and where you let them go quite hard. So sometimes I like them to be hard, where they're kind of giving an edge of like a bone, like a cheekbone there, and where you let them go soft. And that's kind of what kind of gives you the shape of the face. I'm going to shut the door because you can hear my neighbours talking. There we are. So the next bit at this point is usually adding the shadows. So then I go back to my big brush and tend to have more blue than pink. So this is Ultramarine Blue Light again, though not my Zecchi one. So I tend to have more blue than pink. So I tend to get, but again, I have to start out with a really light. Yeah, that's quite light. but it needs some pink. I never have my shadows just as blue. So the pink again is I use the Zecchi Primary Red, but I think it's quite a lot like Carmine in other brands. So I've got a Carmine from Jackson's, which is quite similar to this. Still a little bit more. I mean, how much, you know, I quite like it being this sort of purple colour, but whether you have it as blue or red is entirely up to you. But I quite like it being purple, but I have it quite a thin, so yeah, that's probably thin enough. I have it as quite a thin wash. In fact, I probably do even thinner, because her shadows aren't very dark. Because you can build it up, you can always add another layer. And her shadows are really pale. In a face where they were really quite dark, you might have them quite dark. But hers are quite pale. And I'd start somewhere where they're quite dark just to try them out. Yeah, that's good. Because they're so, in her face, they're so pale anyway. So around the eye is always a good place, and the nose is always a good place to start, because they're usually quite dark there. So, and it's coming down the nose here to there. Because if it's too thin, it doesn't matter, you can add another layer. But if you make it really dark, it's going to be hard to get rid of. And then I just use water to thin it out and finish it off there. And then here around the nose. Obviously I'm going to come back and darken up the inside of the nostrils in a minute. But for now we're just doing the thinnest wash first of all. So we're just kind of placing them. When I do Copic portraits, I always place the shadows before I do anything else. It's the very beginning of the portrait, but so I know right where they are before I start, but can't really do that with watercolour. I suppose you could, but it's not what I do. And here they can go in the eye as well. So that's kind of why you have to do that, the pupil, because you're going to be adding these here. I always find it's the second shadow that makes it really dramatic when you come in and do it again, second time. But the first one is kind of, I suppose, just laying the groundwork, saying this is where my shadows are. And then the second ones you can come in and make them really dramatic. And if you've drawn as many portraits as I have, you kind of know where they're going to be. But you have to be careful not to just do them automatically. You have to make sure you actually look and not make the mistake of just thinking you know where they're going to be, because then you end up putting them in the wrong place. So always look. Because I've done that before. Put a shadow where there isn't one, and then it all looks really odd. So now I'm going to get a thinner brush to do the creases around. So for a minute, these ones here, don't disappear. Yeah, the problem with using an iPad is that my picture keeps disappearing. I could change the settings, I suppose. The other thing you kind of learn to do as well with time is just to see colours, because the more you look at this, the more you see colours. And I find that the more you draw portraits, the more you see colours that you never saw before. And of course, because she's got this blue hair, I don't know, you can see this over. There's this really blue colour right here, which I'll put on right at the end. So I don't want to go too dark there because I want space. And oh, it's down on the chin. I've just noticed it as well. It's on the chin there. You don't notice it first. And then later as you're drawing it, you're like, oh, there's a bit there, and there's a bit there, and there's a bit there. I might do that as I do the hair, actually. I'll just take the same colour as the hair. Oh, and it's on her nose. Look. Just seen it on her nose as well. So you don't notice them at first, and then as you're doing it, you'll suddenly see them. And what I find as well, because I was going to say, I'm not very good at line drawing. I mean, that's not entirely true, because I can get likenesses in line drawing, but I don't think my line drawings are that great. Though I do capture a likeness in them, but I don't think they're particularly brilliant. But what I love is as I start to add colour, suddenly you see the person appear in the colour, because I feel like that's where my skill is, or my talent is. It's with colour. And I love seeing the person appear in the colour. So I think I need to let that dry and then go. I've started to add the darker colour, but actually I think I need to let it dry before I finish that. Or maybe not. Looking quite nice. I don't often do wet and wet, which is what I'm doing now. I'm adding more while it's still wet. I usually let it dry and then, and maybe I'll add more to her mouth. And then add the next layer, but it seems to be working, so let's keep on. But it is when you add the second layer that you see it come to life. The first layer of shadows I do is usually so pale that it's just kind of setting them out rather than doing very much. But then when you add the second layer, it suddenly comes to life. So don't be afraid to go dark with the shadows, because I think that's where the life comes from. And I think my portraits have got better as I've got darker. I used to be quite scared of doing really dark shadows, but I think they've got better. See what I was saying about don't draw something in just because you think it should be there. Usually there's a shadow between the eyebrows, and I would normally just automatically draw it in. But I've looked at the photo and there definitely isn't one. Usually there's one right there. So I almost drew it in then. And then I looked at the photo and there really isn't one. So I'm glad I didn't do that, because the temptation would be to draw one. Now I'm going to let that dry a bit more naturally, because I think if I blow dry it, some of that's going to go off a little bit. So while it does that, I'm going to do the eyes. Oh, that's still wet. Okay, I'm going to take that off. I'm going to add some blue to the eyes. I might add some ultramarine, in fact. Especially to that eye, which is darker than the other eye. So that is much darker. That one is light still. I don't want to make that one really dark, because it isn't. I might take the colour out of that one. Go back to that colour. I can see I'm going to end up using colour pencil on those eyes, because they're not going to come out the way I want them to. So That was just a bit more primary red on the lips. I think we need a bit more of that on the cheeks as well, but it needs to be thinner than that. So I've literally just added a drop of water because I feel like the lips have now gone too purple. The cheeks, sorry. But all I'm going to do is do that and dab it off. So there's now a hint of pink, and I might do that on down here as well. There we are. And that's all. And then I feel like I need some yellow in a few places, and I need some dark blue. There's some dark blue under the eyes before I do the eyelashes. So maybe I use Prussian blue. I used a different blue. After saying I wouldn't use any of those blues, I'm using one because it's a darker blue. And I'm not going to water that down very much because under her eyes it's not really watered. So I'm going to just do it, I'm just doing a line of it, and I'm going to do the same at the top. Maybe up here. And then I might just add some water to just smoosh it a bit. So cleaning my brush. And then just literally wetting it out a bit. And dabbing it off, just so there's like a hint of dark blue. In fact, it looks like there's more than that at the top, so I might go back and do that again, but make it better. So a bit more blue up here. As I'm looking and realising that there seems like to be like quite a lot of blue eyeshadow. I'm going to be putting that pearlescent blue up there, but right now, there we are. That's more like it. And I still need some bluey colour in the eyes, but that's way too much. This is what I do, I end up putting too much pigment in. Do this all the time. Overdo it, so I need to put loads of water in. And then just go into the eyes like this. And then I'll just dab it out. So there's barely there pigment. Okay. And then I'll make some grey. This is what I use my brown for quite a lot. This is why the brown is almost gone. So I make a grey with it. Now that's gone too brown. So my best grey is, again, Ultramarine Blue Light. And that brown, which is a burnt umber. And then you get this lovely grey, which is my favourite grey. So I'm going to use that for the inside of the nose, for those nostrils, and for these eyes here. I probably will use black on her eyelashes because they're so black. But generally, oh, that's still wet, obviously. But my best grey is this really, really gorgeous grey. It's just a blue and burnt umber, ultramarine blue and burnt umber, which I love. And I'm going to put it in here too. So whenever you see grey in my portraits, my watercolour portraits, that's what it is. And I don't have a steady hand. I have arthritis in my thumbs, so I have a very unsteady hand when I'm painting. So I never get lines straight. But we're getting there now. See, I think some of her eyes look grey. This one looks really grey. That looks totally grey down there, doesn't it? Okay. I know you're probably looking, thinking, what about the freckles? That was the last thing I do. The other thing I haven't done yet, which I have to do, is the yellow. So, I started about a year ago. I did a Copic portrait that had a lot of yellow in it, so right at the end I added yellow. And I realised that it lifted the whole portrait, and ever since then, pretty much every Copic portrait I do, the very last thing I do is add yellow. And then I started looking and noticed that most faces have yellow on them. So she has yellow down this side of her face here. So pretty much they all have, every face has yellow in it. And if you just add it towards the end, you don't have to add much, but it just lifts the whole face. But particularly around the forehead. And there's usually some there's some, probably can't see all of this, there's some here, there's yellow there. There's yellow there, there's yellow there. It might just be the lighting and how photos are taken, I don't know. But there's some, it's there, it's there, it's there. I mean, obviously if there's and there's usually some in the chin, in the neck, sorry, just under the chin. If you really can't see any, don't add it, but, so you can thin it out. But most faces have it, and it totally lifts them. It just makes a huge difference to how a portrait looks at the end. So I've been adding it ever since, and I think it makes an enormous difference. It just lifts them, and it just adds something at the end. So it's always the last thing I add. And I have several really pale, so for my Copics I've got now about 3 or 4 several really pale yellow Copics. So the last thing I do is look for the yellow, and that would be my advice to anyone. Look for the yellow at the end of a portrait. So that's probably enough. Don't need to overdo it, just look for it. So that's pretty much done, except for, obviously I've got to do the hair, I've got to do the blue, I've got to do the freckles, but this is the hardest bit. So actually I'm going to make sure it's dry. But that's the skin tones. So you've seen how I do the skin tones. I'm probably not going to make you watch my wobbly hand do that. My very wobbly hands. I have to move everything out of the way anyway to be able to do it without wobbling. So I think I might stop recording at this point and try and do this without wobbling. And I'll go finish doing the hair and everything. But I'm going to stop there because you've seen the skin tones.